As the title suggests, I play Dark Souls 3 every year, to completion. Contrary to its reputation, it's become somewhat of a comfort game for me. Not to say that I'm just good at the game or anything, but it's gotten to the point where I've memorized every enemy's attack pattern, every item location, every area, and I know the ins and outs of my build so well that I just breeze through the game every time I play it. What makes it so special to me then? Well, a lot of things really. It's the gameplay, the visuals, and honestly, the most important thing to me whenever I play it these days is the sense of familiarity. Allow me to, for the duration of this video, explain to you why Dark Souls 3 is my favourite game of all time. Dark Souls 3 is a game many wouldn't see as comfort food, and for good reason. Playing it for the first time is tough. The first enemy you encounter can tear your health bar to shreds if you're not careful, and going off the beaten path just ever so slightly leads you up against an enemy you're nowhere near skillful enough to defeat at this point. Past all those is your first bonfire, a brief respite before being tossed against the wall and being asked to defeat a boss whose moveset changes drastically when you finally get him past half health. It's at this point where some players look at the game's famous "prepare to die" tagline and decide, nope, that's not for me. I actually want to play my games and not get pummeled over and over. And that's fair. This is not only the first boss in the game, but it's also a pretty tough one to defeat if you're not familiar with Souls games. I don't recall how many times it took me to finally defeat him, and I didn't even get the sense of satisfaction from finally beating him when I did. I was just happy that I could finally move on and level up for the first time. And honestly, that's another thing. I don't actually remember too much about my first playthrough of Dark Souls 3. Not to say it wasn't memorable. It did leave a lasting impact on me that caused me to play it again and again all these years later. But when I first beat it on PS4, I just kind of put it down and moved on. It was the first Souls game I'd ever beaten at the time, but not the first one I played. That was Dark Souls 2. It was the year later when I picked up Dark Souls 3 on PC via a Humble Bundle or something and decided to play it again. This time, it stuck with me. I was playing with a friend and we had a blast. He was showing me all the things that I missed. We attempted the DLC, and at the end of it I jumped straight into New Game Plus, taking my victory lap of destroying all the bosses with my endgame stats. The satisfaction of obliterating bosses I once struggled with in the early game was so high, I decided to do it again and again and again, and year after year I played and beat Dark Souls 3 on the same character, the same build, racking up those New Game Pluses, and I even managed to get to New Game Plus 8 until my C drive blew up and, well, my saves were unrecoverable. Fun fact, Dark Souls 3 is the only Souls game that doesn't support Steam Cloud saves by default, and I found that out the hard way. Didn't stop me from creating a new character with the exact same build and doing it all over again. I'm just that hooked. But why Dark Souls 3 specifically? Why not Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Sekiro, Bloodborne, Elden Ring? I think it has to do with 3's linear nature. You move from area to area, clearing what you need and moving on. There's only a handful of moments where you can truly just go off the beaten path and find a hidden zone for exploring. Sure, I love to explore in these other games, but it makes replaying them a chore when I feel like I have to clear them or feel dissatisfied for not having 100% of the game. 3, on the other hand, is straightforward and simple. Even those hidden areas are pretty short. It's really easy to say, start a new area, clear it of items, enemies and bosses, and put the game down. It's got a really simple and satisfying gameplay loop that makes it a perfect 1 to 2 hour a night pastime. Dark Souls 1, on the other hand, I'm not exactly familiar with. It takes me a while to figure out where I'm supposed to go again. I don't have the patience to backtrack and explore like I used to as a kid. Sure, I've beaten it once before, but its sluggish controls compared to the streamlined controls of the later games make it hard to go back to after living with 3's improvements for so long. 2, on the other hand, is just far too long for me to enjoy. I played that game for countless nights with a friend, clearing as much as we could, and I still never beaten that game. Well, I like Dark Souls 2 a lot more than 1, but it's far too long for me to actually sink my teeth into. It just becomes a chore after a certain point where 1 and 3 are much more thoughtful with their designs and length. I played through most of Bloodborne, but never beaten it. This isn't really due to anything like me getting bored or not liking it or whatnot. I just don't really have any means of playing it right now. I still have my PS4, but our TV broke, and if you've seen my desk, there is no way it's finding its way there. Bloodborne PC 1. Elden Ring is similar to Dark Souls 2 for me. It's just too long. I started a new playthrough recently in preparation for the DLC since I made the mistake of New Game Plusing my first character who's now just sitting at the first grace. I do want to mention though, if you've never played a Souls game before, Elden Ring is by far the best of the bunch, bar none. Start there, you'll love it. There's a reason it won all those awards. As for Sekiro, I love that game so much. When I finally beat Sword Saint Ishin on my first playthrough, I was over the moon, but there is no way I'm going through that hell again. Sekiro is hard, and I had to dedicate all my time to learn that game to beat it, and I just don't have that in me anymore. One day I'll revisit it again and give it another proper go, but for now, I'm giving it a rest. Dark Souls 3 is familiar to me. I can walk the halls of Firelink Shrine blindfolded. I can abuse the tree just outside of it every playthrough. The vendors see their stockpile of embers empty quicker than anything else as I stuff them in my pockets. I don't really need them anymore, I'm just seeing if I can eventually max them out. Fighting the dancer is like performing in a theatre, the rhythm ever so smooth and perfect. Throwing firebombs at hidden enemies to clear a path that might scare new players. Occasionally meeting the odd player in PvP and testing my skills at the Fight Club. It's nice coming back to this place. It's oddly calming to run through an area, collecting all the items I've already collected dozens of times before, defeating enemies and watching that soul count rise higher and higher, getting my 5 free levels from the pygmy every run and slowly growing my power. I'll put on a video essay and explore the depths. I'll convince a friend to tag along and we'll grind souls together. I know this game inside and out, and yet all I want to do is play it over and over. It's not my most played game in terms of hours, but it is my most replayed game. I've beaten it at least twice every year since it came out, and whenever it's on sale I buy it for my friends so I can walk them through it. As an aside, all the Souls games make for incredible co-op games. Not only are they easier, but it's just a certain charm to them that makes exploring and clearing zones in co-op a real joy. Try it out sometime. Dark Souls 3 gameplay is pretty simple. You have your light attack, heavy attack, weapon art, and the famous dodge roll that no Souls game is complete without. The depth comes from enemy attack patterns as well as there's no animation cancelling, so when you press the attack button you're locked in. You either hit or you don't. It's a brief window of time when you can input a direction to adjust it, but that's all the control you get when you press that button. The biggest depth for me is learning what kind of attacks your weapon does in different states. For example, let's take the Dark Knight Sword, my daily driver. Standing still or walking when attacking will give you a basic combo that's reliable for most situations. It's over the head, meaning you can fight pretty reliably in tight corridors without the weapon bouncing back. Running and then attacking, however, gives you this wide sweep that can hit multiple enemies at once, which is super handy. The kicker is, you don't even need a run-up to do this move. All running attacks can be unleashed quickly by simply tapping the dodge button for a backstep, then immediately hitting the attack button. Your character will do a little run-up to close the gap you just made, and unleash their attack right away. I honestly don't use this in PvE very often, but in PvP this sneaky little trick has won me more bouts than I can count. With the Dark Knight Sword wide sweep on that attack, it catches people off guard once they see me back off, and they can't even dodge out of the way due to its timing and wide angle. Keep that in your pocket next time a phantom invades you. It works for any weapon, you just gotta learn what inputs give you what attack. Aside from attacking, exploring is pretty important too. Each area is pretty straightforward in terms of progression. You have a central bonfire that will occasionally loop back on itself via shortcuts you discover as you travel along, all the while fighting enemies and picking up cool new items here and there. Sometimes meeting a new NPC will become available at Firelink Shrine later. Eventually, you'll encounter a fog wall or an obvious boss arena, defeat the boss, rest at the bonfire acting as their grave, head back to Firelink to level up and move on. It's really simple, but ever so satisfying watching your level go up when your weapons become more powerful whenever you upgrade them. Some areas have hidden pathways that lead to new items and new areas. Some are pretty straightforward to find, like knock down this bridge, then climb down it like a ladder. Others are more obtuse. Like, see this broken statue here of a dragon sitting? Yeah, you get that emote later in the game, and if you come back here and sit next to it at the same position for a moment, you're whisked away to a completely new area with new enemies, items, and one of the hardest boss fights in the game, and it is completely missable. Even to this day, I'll simply forget an area exists until I go through my checklist at the end of the game before hitting the New Game Plus Plus button. I don't see it as a bad thing, however. Just another thing that makes this game great, rewarding those who read the lore and those who experiment to find new things. Did I mention there's a whole slew of illusionary walls that reveal paths to new items and areas that are completely missable? Well, that is if you don't read the messages left behind other players. Trust me, it's better to hit every single wall with a message in front of it than it is to get fed up with the people who put them there in front of the real walls. You'll want some of those items, and there's an entire area you can miss out on too if you're not hitting all them walls. Speaking of messages left on the floor, that's another thing I like about this game. They appear in almost every Souls game, that is, the ability to leave behind messages for other players, and read messages left behind by others. You can only write messages with a limited set of words and layouts, but this has led to so many in-jokes and memes among the Souls community. I'm always laughing at messages like, "Time for crab," spammed on all the giant crabs which are just waiting to stomp on you. And it's nice to get reminders of what items are and where. If you're ever travelling around and see something worth writing a message about, don't hesitate. Whenever a message of yours gets raided by another player, you heal a small amount of health. The messages I've left behind, helping out others or getting a laugh out of them, has saved me through tough boss fights before. You never know, that try finger butthole message might save your life. As you can see, I could go on forever about what makes Dark Souls 3 special to me. I don't think there's ever been a game that gives me such a sense of joy and community as this one does, and it's an absolute joy to share my experiences with you all. I'd go so far as to say Dark Souls 3 has saved me more than once. Others say it's that feeling of overcoming overwhelming odds that give them the confidence to battle their depression and anxieties, and that's true for me to some extent, but to be honest, it's the sense of familiarity, that feeling of homeliness. I feel at ease in Lothric. It's where I go to hang out, where I go to experience silent but jolly cooperation, where I leave my mark and see the marks left by others. So yeah, I love Dark Souls 3, and that's why I play it every year.